and welcome to the Middle East Forum Speaker Webinar Series. I'm Stacy McKenna, and I will be moderating this discussion today. We are pleased to have Winfield Myers of MEF's Campus Watch and Clifford Smith of the Washington Project join us to discuss how Congress can start reforming Middle East studies. Mr. Myers and Mr. Smith will speak for roughly 5 to 10 minutes and open it up for questions. Should you wish to ask a question, please use the question box located at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to get to all questions, but we have many participants on this webinar today, so I apologize in advance if we do not get to yours. And with that, I will turn the discussion over to Mr. Winfield Myers and Mr. Clifford Smith.
Thank you, Stacy. We appreciate this, and thank you to everyone who is tuning in. Title VI of the Higher Education Act of 1965 is our subject. It was founded by Congress with the original intent of producing area studies and language specialists who would enter academia, the CIA, various intelligence agencies, and become policy advisors in various capacities, military and otherwise, to lend support to efforts to increase American security. It was during the Cold War, and people were very concerned about American security internationally. It funded and still does fund a variety of different areas, including Middle East studies, our subject for today. After 9/11, funding for Title VI area studies and language studies was increased tremendously. And by that point, the people who were entering those graduate programs or undergraduate programs entered a field which had become, in the intervening decades, highly politicized, reliably anti-American, anti-Western, anti-Israel, and they remain such today. This is a systemic problem that taxpayer dollars are used to support efforts to really undermine the best interest and the security of the United States. And it is something that we are working on to reform in Washington. And with that, I will turn this over to my colleague, Clifford Smith.
So this issue really sort of got a head of steam recently when Congressman George Holding of North Carolina sent a letter to the Department of Education basically saying that the Duke-UNC Middle East Studies Consortium was a joint project, had sponsored a rapper, a Palestinian rapper, that had openly said he was an anti-Semite and used all kinds of anti-Semitic slogans and encouraged the audience to join him in being an anti-Semite. It was really toxic stuff. And basically is what he said in his letter was, look, they have academic freedom, they have freedom of speech, they can do whatever they want. However, this program is created by a Title VI center, and they are receiving federal dollars for this Title VI center. I don't think taxpayer dollars should go to this kind of programming. You should do some kind of investigation into what's going on. Secretary DeVos then sent a letter back saying, this does concern me, we're going to investigate. Then some of the going back and forth between Duke-UNC and the Department of Education isn't public. What is public is a few months later, the Department of Education sent a public letter to Duke-UNC that was published in the Federal Register, which essentially says, hey, Title VI is for a specific purpose. It's for American national security. You cannot just use it for anything. All of the things you have told us you are using Title VI money for, among other things, gender studies in Iran or analysis of different Middle Eastern films and such, it might be interesting, it might be allowable under academic freedom, but it's not the appropriate use of Title VI funding, which was appropriated and authorized by Congress for a specific reason and has certain legal requirements. This, strangely, just asking the university to uphold its side of the bargain in terms of what they should be spending this money on, was seen as a huge blow to academia in the eyes of academics, which have gotten so used to spending the money on whatever they want that someone even asking them to uphold their part of the bargain was something new. I mean, Jewish groups in particular, but others have been complaining about some of the issues with these programs for a long time. But this was the very first time anybody had actually asked them to uphold their side of the bargain in a substantive way. After this, we got in contact with some more people at the Department of Education and said, hey, look, this is a great first step, but we need more. And they pointed out that a lot of other universities have these kinds of problems. And Winfield and the good people at Campus Watch had done a lot of research on a lot of different Title VI funded centers and noted a lot of things that are problematic about them. For example, a lot of support of the BDS movement, which singles out Israel for boycotts, a lot of foreign dollars going to Title VI centers, Title VI centers getting money from foreign governments that are non-democratic, sometimes interests are diametrically opposed to America, is, needless to say, a conflict of interest with funds that are supposed to be used for American national security. So they said more of these centers need to be called out. If more of these centers are getting called out, then we can do more investigation. Hopefully we can start to really fix this program. Working with Campus Watch, we had started informing some of our friends in Congress about some of these problems, and that this has paid some dividends. Congressman Riggleman, Congressman from Virginia, wrote a letter to Secretary DeVos in late December concerning Title VI abuses at Georgetown University, which again includes some of the same things we're talking about. Open support for BDS, which is against the purpose of the program. All kinds of foreign funds flowing in, so on and so forth. My understanding is this has gotten a lot of attention at the Department of Education. I don't know the inner workings of it, but I know that this is something that they are working on. Not too much later, Congressman Gosar sent a letter, Congressman Gosar from Arizona, and he sent a letter concerning the University of Arizona, which had very similar problems of foreign influence, foreign money, support for BDS, things that should be diametrically opposed to the precise purpose of Title VI. And all of them are saying, look, you can do whatever you want. You can study whatever you want. You can say whatever you want. But if you're going to use federal money that has a specific purpose, you need to use it in accordance with the law. And another thing that Congressman Gosar brought up was that some of the stuff that had apparently been funded by Title VI, at least in part, was so brazenly anti-Semitic that it would violate laws against non-discrimination and such things. That was the subject of an executive order from President Trump in late December, basically saying that anti-Semitism should be treated like any other racial discrimination or other discriminatory under existing laws. Winfield, you can say more about Trump's executive order on combating anti-Semitism.
Sure, he issued this on December 11th. It was called his executive order on combating anti-Semitism. It applies the other Title VI to universities regarding anti-Semitism. The other Title VI being, not to be confused, there are two Title VIs. They're very often confused even by people who should know better, because it's a confusing term. Unfortunately, they're both called Title VI. But the Title VI that the President's executive order applies is Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And under that, universities that use federal dollars, which of course are most universities, to sponsor or advance anti-Semitism can be held responsible. And the penalties for this are far more draconian, if they are ever put into place, than those for Title VI of the Higher Education Act, because under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, all federal funding can potentially be cut from a university that violates that act. And as Cliff mentioned, many of these Title VI recipients are advancing BDS left and right, and the President's order applies the definition of the International Holocaust Alliance to, Remembrance Alliance to universities. And through that definition, BDS, or the denial of Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, is in fact a violation of the 64 Civil Rights Act. So these universities, as Representative Gosar pointed out, and he was speaking especially about the University of Arizona, but I think we can apply this to other schools as well, potentially, is in danger of losing all federal funding, which again is a draconian move. I don't know how likely that is, but if you want to get universities' attention, discuss pulling all federal funding from them, not just from a Middle East Studies program, but from hospitals, sciences, Pell Grants, everything yanked out from under them. So I can give you an example or two, if you would like, of Title VI abuse. Let me give you one that really goes straight to the heart of this, and that's with Judith Tucker, a professor at the Center for Contemporary Arab Studies at Georgetown University. I choose her because Tucker is very high profile. She is the immediate past president of the Middle East Studies Association, or MISA. MISA is the umbrella academic organization, the primary one for scholars in this field. At her going away party, you could almost call it, at last year's MISA conference, a national conference, rather than delivering a presidential address herself, which is customary, she chose to give a keynote address. Mark Lamont Hill. Hill is a professor of communications at Temple University. He has no academic training or expertise in Middle East studies or area languages. He was chosen solely because he is viciously, vehemently anti-Israel. You may remember Hill was actually fired by CNN for going before the UN and in a speech before them, reflecting on the Hamas call for Palestine to be free from the river to the sea, which is an eliminationist call, meaning the obliteration of Israel as a Jewish state. So that's who Tucker chose to come into MISA and deliver a keynote speech, a man with no academic experience in this field, but who had all of the credentials necessary to fulfill MISA's goal of bashing and ultimately even eliminating Israel. Tucker, like many of her colleagues, is supported with Title VI money. So this is your taxpayer dollars at work.
And I want to point out one other sort of good example on that. At Georgetown, for example, they have a board of advisors that oversees their Middle East Studies program, and several Gulf state luminaries are on their board of advisors. Abdul Rahman bin Saud Al Tahini, the Qatari Minister of State, is one of them. Turki Al Faisal Al Saud, the chairman of the King Faisal Research Center for Islamic Studies in Saudi Arabia, is another one. Again, I'm not necessarily saying anything about any one individual in particular, but when you have monarchical states, dictatorships that are having oversight over monies that are US taxpayer funded, and clearly they have different values, different interests than the United States does, that should be seen as a problem. It's a conflict of interest. And whether or not these universities want to, work with these people, take their money, whatever, that's their business to the degree allowed by law, but it shouldn't be intermingled with, again, funds that are for a specific purpose. And the universities are really flirting with the line, as Winfield put it, not only on losing their Title VI money, but losing more if they are continuing to buddy up with anti-Semites and such in a way that is, so over the top, so vicious that it is violating not only the Title VI laws for higher education funds, but their entire federal funding, potentially with the civil rights rules.
All right, thank you both so much. We have come to our Q&A section. Why can't professors who teach lies, not just their opinions, be removed or censured?
Removal of professor is a very difficult thing. A lot of them are protected by tenure. You immediately jump into the courts if you attempt to do this. They are protected, of course, by the First Amendment. Professors can say what they wish. And when you get into what is true and what is false, unless they are teaching something that is demonstrably false, empirically beyond the pale, which is difficult in a classroom in the humanities or the social sciences, it's a very, very difficult and long process to try to do this. And so we respect their First Amendment rights, just as we expect them to respect ours to critique them. And our goal at Campus Watch is to critique them, to expose them to a wide audience beyond the campus. And in some cases, I couldn't agree more. Some professors, it's unfortunate that they are teaching and that they are brainwashing students, but removing professor is a very difficult thing to do. It's a legal challenge beyond the pale for most of us.
I would simply say that I think that this is a long-term project. This is not something you're going to solve overnight. I think is what you really need to do is change the culture. I think getting universities used to the fact that, look, if you're going to accept federal money, you actually have to do with it what the money is for, is a start of a change of that culture. Other changes would be people that are watching this call, people that are active, people that are interested in these issues, being active in their alumni associations, being active with donors that, telling donors what their monies are going to. Those kinds of cultural changes take time, and that would lead to hiring of better university professors next time, and hiring of new ones that actually have a truly diverse set of perspectives and that truly do, have some form of objective teaching that isn't just driven purely by their own political agenda.
If you're displeased with your alma mater, don't donate. Write the president, tell him if it's a state school, write legislators and object.
I agree.
Great, thank you. What can be done about student organizations in colleges who refuse to allow pro-Israel speakers on campus?
I think that a lot of them can probably be de-recognized. I mean, part of being recognized by university administration and receiving funds, remember, when these are recognized, they often receive funds from the university. They have use of university facilities. If you're not going to play by the rules, and the rules include free speech, why recognize these groups?
Great. Has any Title VI funding been withheld yet from any universities, and how is that final decision made?
No, none has yet been withheld, and that's actually what kind of makes this entire blow up so interesting, is when the only, at least public action that is known so far is the Department of Education telling Duke UNC that basically they weren't really meeting the requirements of the grant, and that what their programming was being paid for by Title VI money didn't really fit. However, they actually already sent the next year's Title VI money as they sent that letter. So there was never any real doubt that for the time being, they were still getting their funding, even ones that have already been sort of found by the Department of Education to not be fully complying with the rules. I think that will change if things don't change at the university. I do think that the current people at the Department of Education are serious about sort of sticking the screws to them, but they're taking a very metered, slow approach. And so what this tells you is kind of interesting, though, because in other words, all the blow up, there were countless op-eds accusing the Department of Education of McCarthyism and all kinds of crazy pushback from the education establishment. All of this because they were simply asked, maybe you ought to uphold your part of the bargain with this little bit of your money. I mean, if they don't want to teach the kind of stuff that the government is asking them to with the government's money, they don't have to accept it. I don't think there's a single Title VI center that's in danger of going broke anytime soon. They have large amounts of money from state, other federal programs even. They have tons of money from donors, from private donors, from alumni, so on and so forth. So merely asking them to uphold their part of the bargain sort of caused this backlash, which shows you how big the problem is and why it is necessary to continue pressing on this issue.
Thank you. In your opinion, why are so many academics so anti-Semitic and anti-Israel?
That's a good question, and I don't know that I can give you a good answer other than that increasingly Middle East studies in particular is being staffed by people with an axe to grind against Israel. Many of them are of Middle Eastern origin themselves. Increasingly, others have noted this for years and years and years. And anti-Semitism is acceptable on the extremes. It's acceptable on the extreme right, and it's acceptable on the extreme left. And the extreme left has been in control of academia now for many, many years. So it passes in what passes for polite company there, if you will. It's systemic, and we see it all the time among Middle East studies professors. They make statements which, were they made about any other ethnic group, minority group, would be absolutely beyond the pale, and they would be fired. You ask about losing your job. I don't think there's any question that they would lose their job. But when they make it about Jews or Israel, people just shrug their shoulders. It's not a big deal to most administrators.
Thank you.
Sadly.
Wow, that's very true. If the colleges and universities don't reopen in the fall and stay online, what will the effect of the monitoring be?
The effect of the monitoring? For classrooms, that's an interesting question. We don't monitor classrooms per se. We get reports about classrooms sometimes. But if the classrooms go online, increasingly, it'll be a question of copyright, a question of intellectual property rights that we would have to speak to a council about, because we don't want to invade someone's property rights for that. But for monitoring of what they say publicly, for public panels, which can be broadcast through Zoom, just as this one is. For their writings, the monitoring will go on as it always has. In fact, it is possible that the public lectures and panels will be more open to video than they have been in the past. We've had our correspondents kicked out of some ostensibly public lectures in Washington, for example, over the past few years, at Georgetown, at George Mason, and in other places, just because they knew they were going to write negative things about them and be critical of them. They were asked to leave. So, you know, at universities, Cliff mentioned the thin-skinned nature of academia when this letter from Representative Holding hit. This is something we see all the time. This is a profession unused to criticism, and they take criticism very, very poorly.
Thank you. In your experience, are these cases supported by members of Congress on both sides?
These cases being the letters that are being sent, I guess I would say that obviously all the members that have written letters raising these issues have been Republicans. I think there are Democrats that are sympathetic to the plight of radicalism, burying your head in the sand for foreign influence and for anti-Semitism. I do think, however, that sort of the radical Islam leftist nexus is a real thing, and that makes many Democrats fearful of being accused of being bigots or being anti-Muslim or anti-Arab, and I think that makes them less likely to reach out on this issue. So far, most have been pretty silent, unfortunately. I do hope that will change. I do think there are Democrats that understand this issue and care about it. It's just a matter of getting them to stand up to their base. We certainly try. We are nonpartisan. We work with everybody we can, but I do think it is a difficult issue for Democrats right now.
All right, thank you both so much. On closing, could you just give us some examples of where to find some documentation or articles you've written to further learn about this, and reiterate again, I know you've already gone over it, but what we can do to try to change this going forward?
I would say go to Campus Watch's website, which is it's part of the Middle East Forum. You can go to the Middle East Forum website if you're more used to that, and you'll find under Campus Watch Research and various other titles there, a lot of material that we have written on Title VI. There's actually a category called Title VI you can click on, and under institutions, and you'll find a wealth of information about Title VI over the past many years. As to what we can do, I would say object. As I said earlier, if you are a graduate of a university that is, whether it's Title VI or not, that is abusing its authority, that is politicized, biased, anti-America, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, don't give them money, first and foremost, and write to the president, the board of trustees, and if it's a state university, write to the governor, write to the legislators, and object to this. The more noise that comes out about this, the better. It's what Campus Watch exists for, is to educate the public and to hold these professors responsible. And that's a big part of it, is voting with your dollars, voting with your feet, and making your objections known.
I would also add one other small, very, very long-term thing, and that is, if you know anybody that is interested in Middle East studies, that is interested in these kinds of issues, that is young or has ambition in this area, as difficult as it is, and it is extraordinarily difficult to get involved in a meaningful way, to get those kind of tenured professorships. But encourage them, because in the long run, the best counter to bad speech is better speech, and bad professors, good professors. So I think too many people, for understandable reasons, but have been discouraged from entering academia because of these reasons. And I think that's counterproductive in the long term. I understand the reasons for it, but I think it's detrimental in the long run. I have been shaped in a lot by the few professors that did have, I would say, more objective views on these kinds of things and willing to sort of hear both sides. I've been influenced by them a lot. I've been helped by them a lot. And I would hope there would be more out there as time goes by. But of course, that's a much longer term issue.
All right, thank you both. We have come to the close of our webinar. I'd like to thank Win and Cliff for joining us again today. Please be on the lookout for our weekly webinar offering for next week. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful day.